Imagine a medical intervention that is scientifically proven to prevent up to like 80% of chronic diseases.
Right.
An intervention so incredibly powerful that premier medical journals have found it actually rivals the efficacy of prescription antidepressants, like in preventing a relapse of major depression.
Which is just staggering when you think about it.
It is. But now, imagine that instead of prescribing this intervention, our modern culture actively shames you for using it.
Hmm.
Dismissing it as a luxury or a weakness or just a frivolous waste of time. So today we are talking about the most misunderstood, commercially hijacked medical protocol on Earth, and that is self-care.
It's really the ultimate paradox of modern health, isn't it? I mean, we spend literally trillions of dollars globally on reactive healthcare.
Oh, yeah. The pharmaceuticals, the surgeries.
Exactly. The complex pharmaceuticals, emergency surgeries, all these genetic therapies, just to manage the devastating symptoms of chronic diseases. Yet, the foundational biological maintenance required to prevent the vast majority of these diseases in the first place, well, it's been relegated to the beauty aisle of the grocery store.
It's a bath bomb.
Right. We've taken the profound physiological maintenance of the human machine and just reduced it to a consumer aesthetic.
And that is exactly what we are dismantling today. So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are thrilled to have you with us as we embark on this vital mission. Today, we are taking our cues directly from the philosophy of Dr. Ferris Corbett and the HE Cares Training and Education Center.
A fantastic resource, truly.
Absolutely. And their core mission is incredibly straightforward. But when you look at the state of public health, it's actually quite profound. It's helping individuals and organizations build healthier lives and environments simply because your health matters.
Yeah, that phrase, because your health matters. It sounds simple, but it operates as a radical foundational premise in a world that just prioritizes endless output.
Right, like produce, produce, produce.
Exactly. It asserts that your health matters intrinsically, not because it makes you a more productive worker, not because it gives you some marketable aesthetic for Instagram, but because your fundamental cellular biology just deserves protection.
I love that. Your cellular biology deserves protection.
So to understand where we are heading today, we really have to strip away all that marketing fluff. We're going to start by formally defining self-care through a rigorous clinical lens. Then we're going to look under the hood at the actual measurable physiological impacts of neglecting it.
The scary stuff.
The very scary stuff. From there, we'll unpack the hard, peer-reviewed evidence proving its efficacy. And finally, we'll explore practical, evidence-based tactics you can integrate into your life, no matter how demanding your environment is.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can truly understand the profound medical benefits of self-care, we absolutely have to clear the air. We need a baseline definition that doesn't involve, a credit card or a hashtag.
Couldn't agree more.
So let's look at the World Health Organization. The WHO defines self-care as the ability of individuals, families, and communities to promote health, prevent disease, maintain health, and cope with illness and disability with or without the support of a healthcare provider.
It's a very dense definition, but every single word in it is chosen with clinical precision. Notice what's missing there.
There's nothing about bubble baths.
Exactly. There is no mention of indulgence. There is no mention of purchasing power or luxury. The key operational verbs are promote, prevent, maintain, and cope. This is an active, ongoing biological protocol.
So let's break down what it actually is based on this clinical framework from Dr. Corbett's materials. First, it is a proactive, intentional practice. It is literally the maintenance of your human machinery.
The day-to-day upkeep.
Right. And it's comprehensive, so it requires physical, emotional, social, and spiritual pillars. But the part that really struck me is this concept of a boundary. Self-care represents the crucial boundary you set between your output, what you're giving to the world, your employer, your family, and your internal resources.
Yeah, that concept of a boundary is the linchpin of public health.
Yeah.
Because in clinical terms, we look at human capacity. You, as a biological entity, you're a finite resource.
Not a machine that can just run forever.
Your machines need oil changes,
Yeah.
right? You require a specific amount of caloric energy, a specific amount of neurochemical replenishment, and a specific amount of cellular repair time. If your output consistently exceeds the maintenance of your internal resources, the system doesn't just get tired.
It breaks.
It eventually fails completely.
Yeah.
Self-care is the protocol for maintaining those resources. It is the act of keeping the ledger balanced.
Which brings us to what it is not. And this pushes back against a very popular cultural narrative. Self-care is not self-indulgence. It is not selfishness. It's not like checking out from life, rather, it's checking in.
Yes.
And crucially, it is not a reward for hard work. It is the fuel that makes the work possible in the first place.
That distinction right there between reward and fuel, that requires a massive paradigm shift. Culturally, we are taught to view rest or biological maintenance as this prize you earn only after you have utterly exhausted yourself.
Right, like I survived the 80-hour work week, now I get to sleep.
Exactly. But clinically, that's like saying you only earn the right to put gasoline in a car after you've pushed it 5 miles down the highway on empty. It makes absolutely no mechanical sense. And yet, that is exactly how we treat the human nervous system.
But wait, I have to ask a question that I know a lot of people listening are probably thinking. Doesn't treating yourself count for something? Like if I've had a brutal week at work, I'm stressed to the max, and I decide to buy something a little out of my budget to make myself feel better, a luxury item, a massively expensive dinner, doesn't that boost my mood?
Well,
Because treating self-care like buying an expensive luxury car when you can't afford the gas to run it, it looks good, right? You look amazing driving it off the lot and everyone assumes you've got your life together. Doesn't that count as caring for myself?
it counts as a mood alteration. But we need to be very precise about the neurobiology of what is actually happening there. To use your analogy, treating self-care like buying an expensive luxury car when you can't afford the gas to run it is a brilliant way to understand the disconnect.
Right.
It looks fantastic. It signals status to your community. But it won't actually get you anywhere because the fundamental mechanics, the fuel, are missing. You've purchased an exterior shell.
So the luxury item is just the shiny exterior, but my engine is still completely dead.
Precisely. What's fascinating here is the neurobiological difference between a commercialized treat and actual clinical self-care. When you buy that luxury item you can't really afford, you are seeking a rapid change in your emotional state.
The retail therapy hit.
Yeah, exactly. You are triggering a quick release of dopamine in the brain's reward center. It's a chemical spike. But what happens after the spike?
You realize you have to pay the credit card bill.
Yes. The dopamine levels crash rapidly, and now you have the added psychological weight of financial stress. You haven't restored your internal resources. You've actually depleted them further to buy a temporary 5-minute emotional distraction.
Oh, wow. So I'm essentially taking out a high-interest loan against my future well-being for a fleeting chemical high.
That is exactly what it is. Clinical self-care, as outlined by the WHO and Dr. Corbett's educational framework, is not about the dopamine spike. It is about internal resource maintenance. It's about building the physiological and psychological capacity to handle the demands of life, not finding expensive ways to momentarily escape those demands. It's the daily, often entirely unglamorous discipline of preventing disease and maintaining baseline cellular health.
Unglamorous is the perfect word for it. So if commercial self-care is a quick dopamine hit, clinical self-care is the slow, steady drip of actual biological maintenance.
Exactly.
And now that we've stripped away the marketing fluff and established that self-care is about maintaining the human machinery, we really need to look under the hood. We need to understand the actual biology of what happens when we do, and more terrifyingly, when we don't practice it.
And this is where the conversation shifts from behavioral psychology into pure physiology. The human body is engineered with an incredibly sophisticated ancient system for managing environmental demands, known as the autonomic nervous system.
Right, the automatic stuff.
Yeah, this system operates entirely below our conscious awareness, regulating heart rate, digestion, respiratory rate, and pupillary response.
And this system essentially has two main gears, right? The sympathetic state and the parasympathetic state.
Yes, the sympathetic state is your fight or flight mode. It is an evolutionary masterpiece designed for acute, immediate survival.
The classic tiger in the bushes.
Exactly. If a tiger jumps out of the bushes, your sympathetic nervous system instantly floods your bloodstream with adrenaline and cortisol. It physically shunts blood away from your digestive tract and your skin, routing it directly to your major muscle groups so you can run or fight.
So your body just shuts down anything that isn't helping you survive the next 30 seconds.
Right. Your heart rate spikes, your pupils dilate to take in more light, and your immune system is temporarily suppressed because your body cannot waste energy fighting a common cold when it needs to survive a predator attack.
It's a complete emergency override. But here's the profound problem we face. In our modern world, the tiger is rarely a predator in the bushes. Today, the tiger is a passive-aggressive email from your boss at 8:00 p.m. The tiger is a traffic jam when you're already 20 minutes late for a meeting. It's the relentless stream of push notifications on your phone.
And this is the crux of the modern health crisis. Your amygdala, the fear center of your brain, it cannot distinguish between a physical threat to your life and a psychological threat to your ego or your schedule.
It treats an email exactly like a tiger.
The biological cascade is identical.
Mhm.
Cortisol floods the system. Your blood pressure rises. Your digestion halts. When you live in a chronic state of stress, you are perpetually trapped in this sympathetic gear.
So when we practice consistent self-care, what we are actually doing on a biological level is manually shifting those gears.
Yes, manually.
We are purposefully moving the body out of that sympathetic fight or flight state and into the parasympathetic state, which is known as rest and digest.
Exactly. The parasympathetic state is where all biological repair occurs. When you manually shift into this state, which lowers your circulating cortisol, you make chronic low cortisol your baseline.
And low cortisol is the goal here.
It is the holy grail of health. This allows your human machinery to actually execute its maintenance protocols. Your immune function rebounds because it's no longer being suppressed. Your blood pressure normalizes, protecting the delicate endothelial lining of your cardiovascular system. Your sleep architecture deepens, allowing for vital tissue repair and memory consolidation.
Okay, let's look at what happens when we refuse to manually shift that gear. If we are constantly in the sympathetic state, it leads to a concept the source material calls allostatic load,
Yes.
which sounds heavy. Let me throw out an analogy here. If you think about your brain like a smartphone or a computer, right? If you leave 100 tabs open and you never reboot, the battery just drains and the processor overheats.
That's a great way to visualize it.
The fan is whirring, the phone is hot to the touch. That's our sympathetic nervous system stuck in overdrive, right? It's just burning out the hardware.
That is a phenomenal analogy because it captures the hidden nature of the damage. The hardware is literally degrading. Allostatic load is the physiological wear and tear on the body that accumulates when an individual is exposed to repeated or chronic stress.
So what does that wear and tear actually look like inside us?
In the human body, those overheated processors manifest physically as systemic inflammation. When your body is under constant allostatic load, your immune system becomes confused and hyperactive, releasing inflammatory markers throughout your bloodstream.
Systemic inflammation. And we aren't talking about a swollen ankle after a sprain here. We are talking about the entire internal environment of the body existing in a state of low-grade chronic alarm.
Yes. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, systemic inflammation is the precursor to almost every major modern health crisis.
Every single one.
Just about. It damages the lining of your blood vessels, which leads to arterial plaque buildup and cardiovascular disease. It interferes with cellular receptors, causing insulin resistance, which directly leads to type 2 diabetes. It even crosses the blood-brain barrier, contributing to neurodegenerative diseases.
So when you skip self-care, you are not just feeling stressed. You are creating a highly toxic environment inside your body where chronic disease is biologically guaranteed to thrive.
It's cellular damage masquerading as productivity.
Man, cellular damage masquerading as productivity, that's heavy. And the consequences aren't just physical. The mental consequences of this unchecked allostatic load are equally devastating. We are talking about burnout.
And burnout is a clinical term now.
Right. It's crucial to highlight for you listening that burnout isn't just a corporate buzzword anymore. The World Health Organization, in their International Classification of Diseases, the ICD-11, now officially recognizes burnout as an occupational phenomenon.
That inclusion in the ICD-11 was a monumental shift in how the global medical community views workplace stress. The ICD-11 characterizes burnout very specifically. It is defined by feelings of severe energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's job, or feelings of negativism or cynicism related to one's job, and reduced professional efficacy.
So it's not just I'm tired, it's I cannot function in this role anymore.
Exactly. It is a recognized syndrome resulting specifically from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed.
That has not been successfully managed, meaning the internal resources were continuously depleted, the boundary was completely breached, the self-care fuel was never replenished, and the machinery broke down. Burnout is the human battery reaching absolute zero.
Correct. It is the clinical endpoint of neglected self-care.
Okay, so we have established that this biological shift between the sympathetic and parasympathetic states is crucial, and the structural cost of neglecting it is severe physical and mental degradation. But to prove that this isn't just theoretical physiology, we need to transition to the empirical evidence, because Dr. Corbett's approach is built entirely on hard data. He brought the receipts, as the source material notes, and we are going to look closely at what the peer-reviewed science actually says.
And we must emphasize that the data is unequivocal. We are not talking about small, anecdotal studies with a sample size of 10 people. We are looking at massive, highly respected medical journals confirming that self-care is a potent, measurable medical intervention.
Let's start with the workplace, looking at burnout and performance. There is a fascinating study published in the Journal of Applied Psychology that looked at something called microbreaks.
Oh, this is a great one.
Yeah, these are very short moments of self-care taken during the workday. And the study found that these microbreaks significantly reduce fatigue and actually increase task performance.
To understand why a microbreak increases performance, we have to talk about ultradian rhythms.
Ultradian, not circadian.
Right. Just as we have circadian rhythms that govern our 24-hour sleep-wake cycle, our brains operate on ultradian rhythms during the day. These are roughly 90 to 120-minute cycles of peak cognitive focus, followed by a physiological trough.
A trough, like a dip.
A natural dip where the brain literally runs low on the sodium and potassium ions required for neurons to fire efficiently.
So your brain physically runs out of the electrolytes it needs to process information.
Exactly. When you force yourself to push through that natural dip without a break, when you stare at the screen and try to grind it out, your cognitive performance plummets, your error rate skyrockets, your processing speed slows down.
Because the chemical fuel just isn't there.
Right. Taking a micro break, stepping away, looking out a window, doing a quick physical stretch, allows the brain to replenish those ions. You reset that cognitive rhythm. You return to the task not just feeling refreshed, but mechanically capable of performing better.
So taking a break isn't slacking off, it's literally sharpening the axe. But let's zoom out and look at the long-term data, because this next statistic from JAMA Internal Medicine, the Journal of the American Medical Association, is just staggering.
It really is.
The research highlights that lifestyle-based self-care, which includes diet, exercise, and stress management, could prevent up to 80% of chronic disease cases.
80%. Let that number sink in.
Honestly, I have to stop here, because how is that even possible? We spend billions of dollars on advanced pharmaceuticals, on cutting-edge surgical techniques, on genetic mapping. How is it possible that simply taking a micro break, eating a balanced diet, or managing stress can rival the efficacy of all that and prevent 80% of chronic diseases? It always sounds too simple to be true.
It sounds too simple until you understand the root cause of those diseases. As we discussed with allostatic load, chronic diseases like heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and many forms of cancer do not happen overnight.
Right.
They are the downstream effects of decades of systemic inflammation and metabolic dysfunction. Pharmaceuticals are largely designed to manage the symptoms of a disease after the structural damage has already occurred. You take a statin to lower cholesterol after your blood vessels are compromised. You take metformin to manage blood sugar after your cells become insulin resistant.
Right, it's reactive.
But lifestyle-based self-care is proactive. It addresses the root cause at the cellular level. When you manage stress, you prevent the chronic cortisol release that causes insulin resistance. When you exercise, you keep the endothelial lining of your cardiovascular system supple, preventing plaque adherence. It is the ultimate preventative medicine because it stops the cascade of inflammation before it ever begins.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because it's not just physical health. The mental health data is just as profound. A meta-analysis published in The Lancet, arguably the most prestigious medical journal in the world, examined mindfulness-based self-care. And they found it is as effective as maintenance antidepressant medication in preventing a relapse of major depression. I mean, we need to spend some time on this. How does a behavioral practice rival a highly engineered pharmaceutical in preventing a relapse of depression?
This is a paradigm-altering finding in psychiatry. To understand it, we have to look deeply at the mechanisms of a depressive relapse. Depression fundamentally alters the physical neural pathways in the brain.
It actually changes the brain's shape.
Yes. It strengthens the connections in the amygdala, making an individual highly reactive to negative stimuli, and it shrinks the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for logic and emotional regulation. It's like a sled going down a snowy hill. Depression creates a deep, well-worn groove in the snow.
Oh, I see.
When a new stressor occurs, the brain automatically defaults to that deep depressive groove because it's the path of least resistance.
So the brain is physically wired to fall back into depression when stressed. And antidepressant medications, like SSRIs, help by altering neurotransmitter levels, like serotonin, to essentially buffer the brain against that stress, making it harder for the sled to fall into the groove.
Exactly. But what the Lancet study showed is that mindfulness-based self-care does the exact same thing structurally through a process called neuroplasticity.
Neuroplasticity.
Mindfulness is the practice of being intensely aware of what you're sensing and feeling in the moment without interpretation or judgment. When you practice this consistently, you are engaging in Hebbian learning. Neurons that fire together wire together.
So by practicing mindfulness, you are physically building a new pathway in the snow.
Yes, you are literally thickening the gray matter in the prefrontal cortex and shrinking the amygdala.
Yeah.
You are training the brain to recognize a stressor, pause, and choose a different neural pathway, rather than automatically triggering the depressive cascade.
It builds a permanent cognitive buffer.
The fact that this behavioral practice can physically alter brain structure enough to rival the efficacy of pharmaceuticals in preventing relapse, it speaks volumes about the raw biological power of intentional self-care.
It's incredibly empowering to know that we have that kind of neurological control through our habits. But we also have to look at the dark side of this data. What happens when we completely fail to protect those internal resources? The source material points specifically to research on caregiver burden.
Caregivers, people who are responsible for the unrelenting daily care of a sick, elderly, or disabled family member, are a population chronically exposed to extreme stress.
And they often have absolutely zero time for self-care.
They are the tragic, perfect case study for what happens when output vastly exceeds internal resources for years on end.
And the research consistently shows that caregivers who do not practice self-care have significantly higher markers of pro-inflammatory cytokines. And this means they are physically aging faster at a cellular level.
It's heartbreaking, but it's biologically true.
Let's break this down for the listener. What exactly is a pro-inflammatory cytokine?
Cytokines are small proteins released by cells that have a specific effect on the interactions and communications between cells. Think of them as the chemical messengers of your immune system.
Okay.
Pro-inflammatory cytokines are the specific messengers that sound the alarm, telling the body, we are under acute attack, triggered the inflammatory response.
Let me try to use an analogy here. It's like calling the fire department when there's a fire.
Yes, but imagine the fire department shows up, puts out the fire, and then just never leaves.
Oh, wow.
Because the caregiver is constantly stressed, the body keeps sending out those alarm messengers. So the fire department stays in your house, and they keep spraying high-pressure water into your living room for years.
And eventually the water does infinitely more damage than the original fire.
Exactly. That chronic flood of inflammatory chemicals damages healthy cells.
And this leads to the biological aging part, specifically regarding telomeres.
Exactly. Telomeres are the protective caps on the ends of your chromosomes. The classic analogy is the plastic tip on the end of a shoelace that keeps it from fraying.
Right.
Every time a cell divides, the telomere gets a tiny bit shorter. When telomeres get too short, the cell can no longer divide, and it enters a state called senescence, where it dies. That shortening is the literal biological process of aging.
And the stress accelerates this.
Yes. The chronic presence of pro-inflammatory cytokines accelerates the shortening of those telomeres. So when we say skipping self-care makes you age faster at a cellular level, it is not a poetic metaphor. It is a measurable, physiological reality. You are shortening your lifespan.
That is utterly terrifying, but it is also the ultimate motivation. If we can prevent 80% of chronic diseases, rival pharmaceutical efficacy for depression, and literally slow down cellular aging just by engaging in lifestyle maintenance, well, the obvious next step is figuring out how to actually execute this. Because knowing the science is great, but as we said, we live in a culture that is often openly hostile to this kind of maintenance. So we must provide you with the practical toolkit to build what Dr. Corbett calls a health-supporting environment.
We need to operationalize this knowledge. And the brilliance of this framework is that it's not about grand, sweeping, expensive vacations. It's about tactical daily interventions you can implement at work, at home, and anywhere in between.
Let's start with the workplace, since that is ground zero for the accumulation of allostatic load. The first tactic is the 50-10 rule.
The 50-10 rule is a direct application of the ultradian rhythms we discussed earlier. For every 50 minutes of deep, focused work, you take 10 minutes to explicitly shift your nervous system.
So like actually stepping away.
You stand up, you stretch to move stagnant blood, you look away from your screens to let your ciliary muscles relax.
Wait, what are the ciliary muscles?
They're the tiny muscles inside your eyes that constantly contract to change the shape of your lens, allowing you to focus on close objects, like a computer screen. When you stare at a screen for hours, Those muscles are in a state of permanent contraction, which causes eye strain and signals subtle stress to the nervous system.
Just from focusing up close.
Yes, looking out a window at a distant object allows those muscles to physically release.
So the 50-10 rule is a forced microbreak. You are intentionally interrupting the accumulation of fatigue before it turns into structural damage. Now, the second workplace tactic is boundaries, specifically the practice of saying no to a meeting that could have easily been an email, especially when your plate is already full.
Boundaries are the absolute gatekeepers of your internal resources. Every time you say yes to a demand that does not align with your capacity, you are silently saying no to your own biological maintenance.
Okay, hold on. Setting boundaries and saying no to a meeting sounds fantastic in an academic paper, but let's talk about the messy reality. What if your boss is the one calling the meeting?
That is the big question.
Right. What if your workplace culture is built on the expectation of immediate 24/7 availability? How do we enforce self-care without risking our livelihood? If I say no, I could get fired.
This raises an important question, and it is arguably the most difficult hurdle in the practical application of self-care. The fear of retaliation is real, but we have to look at the psychology of how people treat us, and we have to connect this back to the core concept. Self-care is the fuel for work.
Right, the gas for the car.
If you are an employee, your cognitive function, your creativity, your processing speed, and your resilience are your primary assets. If you do not protect those assets, you will eventually face clinical burnout. And when you burn out, you make critical errors.
Your performance drops anyway.
You become cynical. You are of no use to your employer, and you are far more likely to be terminated for poor performance than for setting a boundary.
So how do you actually do it without getting fired on the spot?
You don't just say no. You negotiate capacity. You train people how to interact with you. Instead of a flat refusal, you say, I can absolutely attend this hour-long meeting, but it will delay the delivery of Project X until tomorrow morning. Which of these two priorities would you like me to focus on right now?
Oh, that's good.
You force the demanding party to acknowledge the reality of finite resources. You aren't being difficult. You are managing resource allocation like a professional. By doing this consistently, you are actually protecting the employer's most valuable asset, your functional capacity.
That's a brilliant, pragmatic way to frame it. You are treating your energy like a strict corporate budget that must be balanced. Okay, let's move from the workplace to the home. Because the allostatic load doesn't just magically vanish when you walk through your front door. You carry that residual cortisol with you.
You certainly do.
The first tactic here is sleep hygiene. The source material calls this the ultimate self-care.
Because it is the foundation upon which all other biology rests. Sleep is the only time your central nervous system gets a complete structural wash. During deep sleep, your brain activates the glymphatic system.
The glymphatic system, how does that physically work?
It's an incredible mechanism. When you enter deep, slow-wave sleep, the glial cells in your brain actually shrink by up to 60%.
Wait, the cells actually shrink?
Yes. This massive reduction in cell size creates space between the neurons, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to rush in and physically wash away toxic metabolic waste products that accumulate during waking hours.
Wow.
Specifically, amyloid beta proteins, which are directly linked to Alzheimer's disease. If you shortchange your sleep, those cells don't shrink, the fluid can't wash the brain, and you leave toxic waste sitting in your neural networks.
And the practical application here is simple but tough for many of us. A cool, dark room and absolutely no screens 30 minutes before bed. Why is the screen time such a deal breaker for the brainwashing?
It comes down to circadian biology and melatonin. Melatonin is the hormone that signals to your body that it is time to lower core body temperature and transition into the deep restorative phases of sleep. Its release is triggered by darkness.
And screens are basically little suns.
Exactly. The blue light emitted by our smartphones and laptops mimics the exact wavelength of a midday sun. When you scroll on your phone in bed, you are artificially blasting your retinas with daylight, immediately halting the production of melatonin. You are forcing your brain to stay in an alert, sympathetic state.
So you are basically tricking your brain into thinking it's noon, put the phone in another room, buy a cheap alarm clock.
Seriously, it changes everything.
The second tactic for the home is something called the kitchen table audit. I love the imagery of this. Taking just 5 minutes at the end of the day to sit down and write out 3 things that went well.
This is a direct, deliberate intervention on neuroplasticity. As human beings, we have a well-documented psychological trait called the negativity bias.
Focusing on the bad stuff.
Evolutionarily, this kept us alive. It was infinitely more important for our survival to remember the exact location of the tiger than to remember the location of the beautiful sunset. We are biologically hardwired to scan our environment for threats, deficits, and dangers.
But again, the tiger isn't there anymore. It's just the annoying comment a coworker made at lunch.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So if we don't actively intervene, our brains will default to that ancient deficit mindset. We will lie in bed ruminating on the one thing that went wrong, ignoring the 99 things that went right.
Which keeps the cortisol pumping.
That rumination keeps cortisol levels elevated, blocking the glymphatic system from doing its job. The kitchen table audit forces your brain to search the day's data for positive inputs. By writing down 3 things that went well, you are literally wiring new positive neural pathways.
It shifts the brain from a deficit mindset to a growth mindset.
Exactly, ending the day by explicitly signaling safety to your nervous system.
It's incredible how such a small, 5-minute habit can fundamentally alter your neurology over time. Now, the final tactic is something you can do anywhere, at any time, in a boardroom, in traffic, and without anyone even knowing you are doing it. It's called box breathing.
Box breathing is an incredibly powerful, clinically proven way to hack your nervous system. The pattern is deceptively simple. You inhale deeply through your nose for 4 seconds, you hold that breath for 4 seconds, you exhale slowly through your mouth for 4 seconds, and you hold your lungs empty for 4 seconds. You visualize moving around the 4 sides of a box.
And doing this lowers your heart rate in under 2 minutes. But why does it work so fast? We talked about manual overrides earlier. What is the exact physiological mechanism happening in the chest when you do this?
It all comes down to the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the primary structural component of the parasympathetic nervous system. It's the longest cranial nerve in the body. It wanders from your brainstem down through your neck, your chest, and deep into your abdomen, connecting directly to your heart, your lungs, and your digestive tract.
It's the superhighway of the rest and digest system.
Precisely. When you are stressed, your breathing automatically becomes shallow and rapid, localized entirely in your upper chest. This fast, shallow breathing constantly signals danger to the brain. Box breathing forces you to engage your diaphragm, the large dome-shaped muscle at the base of your lungs.
Taking a belly breath.
Yes. When you take a deep, slow, diaphragmatic breath, and particularly when you purposefully elongate the exhale and the hold, the physical movement of the diaphragm massages and stimulates the vagus nerve.
So it's a physical manipulation of the nerve.
Yes. And when the vagus nerve is stimulated, it instantly releases a powerful neurotransmitter called acetylcholine directly onto the sinoatrial node of the heart's natural pacemaker.
Wow.
Acetylcholine forcefully and immediately slows down the firing rate of the heart muscle. It is not a psychological trick. It is a mechanical, chemical override. You are using your respiratory system to manually force your cardiovascular and nervous systems out of the sympathetic state and into the parasympathetic state.
That is just phenomenal. You literally have a biological remote control for your nervous system built right into your diaphragm. So what does this all mean?
It means we have agency.
Yes. As we bring all these complex threads together, we have completely deconstructed the commercial illusion of self-care. We've seen the profound, measurable physiological damage of allostatic load, the 100 open tabs on the phone, the microfractures in the bridge, the shortening of our telomeres.
The fire department that never leaves.
Right. And we've seen the protective neuroplastic power of micro breaks, negotiated boundaries, sleep hygiene, and diaphragmatic breathing techniques.
We've seen that it is a hard biological imperative, not an optional luxury.
Exactly. To synthesize the core message from Dr. Ferris Corbett and the HE Cares Training and Education Center, self-care is a discipline. It requires intentionality, negotiation, and daily practice. And there's a quote from the source material that perfectly encapsulates everything we've discussed today. It's a truth that applies whether you are an individual trying to reset your own health or an executive trying to protect your organization's people.
I know exactly the quote you mean.
If you don't make time for your wellness, you will be forced to make time for your illness.
It is an unavoidable mathematical equation of biology. The human machine demands maintenance. You either schedule the maintenance on your own terms, or your biology will eventually force a catastrophic breakdown on its terms. And as we leave you today, I want to pose a final, somewhat provocative thought based on the hard data we've just unpacked.
I'm ready. Lay it on us.
We discussed how micro breaks and the 50-10 rule honor our ultradian rhythms, how they are scientifically proven to increase cognitive performance, and how neglecting this natural biological rhythm increases systemic inflammation and cellular aging.
Right.
If that is true, and the peer-reviewed science emphatically insists it is, then we have to look critically at the foundational structure of modern work. The standard, uninterrupted 8-hour workday, sitting statically at a desk, staring at a screen, was designed during the Industrial Revolution for factory machines, not for the human nervous system.
That's a chilling realization.
I want you to look around your own workplace tomorrow and ask yourself a difficult question. Is this environment designed to support human machinery? Or is it silently demanding we sacrifice our cellular wellness for the illusion of productivity?
That is a deeply powerful question to carry forward. We have to design lives and environments that reflect our biology, rather than constantly fighting against it. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope we've given you not just a new perspective, but a concrete, practical toolkit to protect your most valuable asset. Stay curious, stay intentional, and most importantly, stay healthy. We'll catch you next time.